and Advisory Committee for Measure Z for Humboldt County to order. Please join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll start with roll call.
All right, we'll go ahead and go left to right. Nicholas?
Here.
Bob?
Present.
Sheriff Hansel?
On the Zoom.
And Sheriff, I'll go over this in just a moment, but I understand that you are traveling on official business. So if you are traveling on official business, then you will need to state that for the reason why you are participating via Zoom.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Sean? Yes. Ginger? Yes. Justin? Here. Glenn? Here. Tammy?
Here.
And Darcy? Darcy is absent.
Thanks, Sean. So at this time, I'd like to see if any of my fellow members have any modifications to the agenda. Any modifications? All right, not seeing any. Let's move on to public comment. So if anybody would like to give public comment on a non-agenda item, please come on up to the podium.
My name is Sonny Anderson. I more than likely would like to do agenda items, but I have a problem in my family. They're at a dentist appointment now, and the dentist canceled on us in Fortuna, and I've got to go pick them up. So could I speak real quickly about the roads? Great. So it's been a while since I've talked about the roads and been at the Z meetings. I used to come all the time. And the roads have had major improvement done to them, thanks to Z money and SB1. But we still need quite a bit of money for the roads, and we should be getting more money out of Measure Z, because part of the reason Measure Z ever even got on the ballot was because of the dire need of the roads. And on the second round of approving Measure Z, you see a road crew out working on one of the hey, vote for us kind of deal, and you know, it doesn't seem like we're getting the attention that we should get for the roads. And I'm hoping Sheriff Hansel is where he's at, where the roads are in better shape than the roads that we're driving on right now, so for his safety. Anyway, we have a petition in my hand. We got 91 signatures on it, just asking for $500,000 just for our district, District 5. Of course, all the other districts need money for the roads too. And so, you know, it's a major safety issue for us, for our children that are learning how to drive, for the livestock industry. The big cattle trucks that come out is a major safety hazard for them, the roads, the conditions they're in now. And for the school bus driver and just so many other people that use our roads. It's a major safety issue. And if we ever get a major wildfire, we're definitely going to need that access, ingress and egress for the equipment to get in a timely manner. So anything you can do for our roads, any funding would sincerely be appreciated. And we would like for you folks to approve it before it goes towards the board, because unfortunately there's a board member that if it's not approved by you folks, at least the last meeting I went to regarding Measure Z, he wouldn't budge at all because you guys hadn't said anything about the roads basically. And Rex kept telling him, hey, this is our job to adjust things here. And he says, well, I can't do it because you guys never, you know, put that funding forward for us for the roads. So if this time, if you could make sure it's hopefully on your list of things that we really need to do, we'd sure appreciate it. So I'll hand it 3 copies of the petition. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sonny. And I think Sonny meant District 1. Is there any other public comment from in the hall? Any public comment online? Okay, not seeing any. Let's move on to the approval of our action summary from January 13th of 2023. Any corrections from members of the committee? Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Sure, I would just like to make one correction, that the date on the action summary is, the date of the description of the action summary is incorrect. It should read the November meeting date rather than January 13th.
Thank you. Bob, what are you seeing?
I was ready to make a motion to go ahead and
Go ahead, sir.
approve it with the changes recommended by Sean.
Do we have a second? Second. Seconded by Sean.
All right, and we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Very good.
Nicholas?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Ginger? Justin?
Aye.
Glenn? Tammy?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to our second item under discussion, county administrative office updates, including an update from AB 2449. Go ahead, Sean.
All right. Thank you, Chair Robbins. So effective yesterday, AB 2449 went into effect. And that is requiring, that puts forth changes to remote participation in public meetings such as this. And you all should have gotten an email from our staff on exactly what this means. In essence, members of committees can only participate twice a year remotely, with some exceptions. And when you are participating remotely, you'll need to notify the chair as soon as possible, including at the beginning of the meeting, that you are participating remotely, and you'll need to cite the reason why. I'll quickly go through some of the reasons why. This was why we described why the sheriff was participating remotely today. So just cause is defined in the statute. It deals with child care or caregiving need of a child, parent, grandparent, family member, essentially contagious illness, a need related to physical or mental disability as described in code, or travel while on official business. There are also emergency circumstances that are described in the statute. You don't need to give a lot of description, especially when you're talking about medical reasons why you need to participate remotely, but you will need to state that publicly at the beginning of the meeting, and you'll need to tell the chair also. But again, members need to make that request as soon as possible. I will be tracking this, so yeah, as soon as you know, please let the chair know, let staff know, and then we can work through that process going forward. Finally, your Form 700s, as members of the committee, you'll need to complete your Form 700s. Those are due April 1st. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me.
Go ahead, Bob.
Chair, pursuant to Government Code 54953, I am notifying the committee that I'll be participating remotely at the 3/9/2023 meeting, as I'll be traveling on official county business attending the County Engineers Association Conference. Thank you.
I'll just ask the question, do any other committee members have known commitments that would meet the definition of being able to participate remotely at this time? All right. Well, like Sean was saying, we have our instructions in terms of what we need to do to make the proper notification. Thanks, Bob, and thank you, Sean, for giving us that summary. So let's move on to item number 3, and that's the review of, well, actually, before we do this review of the ongoing applications, Sean, can you give us the latest numbers in terms of estimates of how much money we'll have to make recommendations for?
How did I know that you were going to get to that? Yes, let me see if I can share my screen. Sorry, just a second while I get this going. All right. Can you all see that? There we go. Okay. As you might have seen in the February 7th mid-year budget report, we are facing some pretty grim news in terms of sales tax. And the news is only getting more grim as we get closer to the end of the year. In February, we reported that there was going to be about $13.3 million that we would expect in revenue for fiscal year 22-23. We've since continued to run the numbers and look at the trends, and we are downward projecting that estimate for fiscal 22-23, which will affect 23-24. So we're now projecting $12.6 million for 22-23, and a little bit less than that for 23-24. So this slide is just showing our estimates over the past year. As you can see, in April of 22, we were basing our estimates in conjunction with our consultants based on prior year performance. Prior year was a little over $14 million, and we came into the year projecting a little bit over $14 million in 22-23. And likewise, 23-24. Sales tax, as you know, as we've been reporting to you, has been, especially since the last 2 years over COVID, has been performing exceptionally well. Since that time, those numbers have trended downward. In November, we had revised projections, went down to 13.7. January, we received new reports, 13.3. And then just this week, we were running the numbers again, looking at the first 6 months of the calendar year. And those numbers are about 13% lower than the prior year. So we're trending that out for the rest of the year. And we project that fiscal year 22-23 will come in about $12.6 million. In keeping with tradition of this committee, as CAO Alicia Hayes has talked to you guys many times before, we do try to project conservatively, and that's why that's a big reason why, especially for the most recent projection, we're trying to make sure that there is enough funding there to provide the services that have already been committed. So that number could rise a bit. We don't expect it to rise too much. As I think we talked about in January, definitely at the mid-year report in February, Humboldt County and Mendocino County sales tax trends are not performing the same as the rest of the state. And we have reason that leads us to believe it's tied to the cannabis industry, which is struggling in a big way. So these are the revenue projection numbers that we have at the moment for 22-23 and 23-24. We do expect to have revised projections in about 2 weeks. We'll be meeting with our consultants again. They're just going to get the fourth quarter numbers from calendar year 22, and so that will help us trend out in the future. So this is the best numbers that we have now. Those numbers will change in the future. Looking ahead to 23-24, reported back to your committee in January that we would have a little over $2 million to allocate. Looks like that number is trending downward. As I said, our revenue projections are $1 million below, or $800,000 below what we reported back in January, and that's affecting 23-24, which is about $1 million below what we were projecting before that. So have about $760,000 is what we're looking at now. Again, hopefully that's a conservative number, and hopefully that number will rise. This number does take into account projected salary savings from 22-23. So using the carry forward to fund 23, 24 activities, it's not a lot of money that is going to be carried forward. Again, that number could rise as we progress through the rest of budget development.
Any questions for Sean? Go ahead, Glenn.
Not specifically to Sean, but in looking at this, 2 years ago, the committee forwarded a letter to the Board of Supervisors indicating that we had a concern that we were on a path where the county's ongoing expenses for personnel were going to get to the point where they would essentially extinguish the fund as far as discretionary revenue was concerned. In response to that, the county provided us with a 10-year estimation, and that 10-year estimation suggested that even at the end of the 10 years, there was still going to be about $3.5 million available for discretionary funding. Instead of that projection being accurate, we find ourselves today at a point where the ongoing county personnel expenses are essentially extinguishing the fund 8 years before that estimation suggested that could ever happen. And in fact, the estimation suggested that we would not ever be in this circumstance. The reason I raise this is we have always operated on the presumption that the ongoing county personnel expenses and so on would automatically just be funded by the Measure Z committee regardless of their trajectory. And I, for one member's point of view, think we've reached the point where that assumption is no longer valid. I look at this and I ask myself, how can we best serve the community? And I've reached the decision from my own perspective that continuation of that historic policy is no longer possible at this point. I cannot with good conscience suggest that continuation of all of those county positions in fact is the best expenditure of that money. And in fact, I have a contrary opinion. And that opinion is that providing a very basic level of services to the greatest number of Humboldt County residents is in fact pretty much an obligation of this committee. So I am interested as an individual member in taking a look at our historic process and pattern given this circumstance and potentially changing it with our recommendations this year to the Board of Supervisors. I don't know if there is any other support for that concept on the committee, but I can't with good conscience say to the people of this county that continuation of our historic policy is the best expenditure of that money, and in fact, I'm convinced it is not. So I, for one member, am interested in taking a look at our overall approach to this and seeing if, in fact, we can take a look at something that provides a more generalized and basis-founded approach to the money. We're at the point now where we can't even fund 20% of what had been our historic top three, entities, applicants. So for all extents and purposes, the county's ongoing costs have now extinguished our discretionary capability. And if, in fact, we are really serving the county as a whole and the citizens of the county as a whole, I can't support our historic process. So I would be in favor of us having a discussion today or potentially agendizing it for next meeting about can we, in fact, continue that historic process, because I think it no longer serves the community.
Thank you, Glenn. Do other committee members have questions for staff or would like to make a comment for themselves? Nicholas, please.
I would like to take the moment just to echo Glenn's statement. I have great concerns about fulfilling the intentions of Measure Z throughout its sectors, and the ongoing county positions have really created this as there's gaps, large gaps in what we're able to fund, be it fire, be it municipal emergency response, be it ambulance response. And I really feel that those were paramount within the passage of Measure Z. And so I do want to echo support for Glenn's need for discussion or to adapt the historical process, because I don't think we can fulfill the commitments that we've made to the community to use this fund to the best end.
Thank you, Nicholas. Any other members here in person? Sean?
Yeah, we've discussed this several times in the past. Glenn has been a strong advocate for changing the system. I've personally said, I don't know if that's our role, and that's very difficult, but to go from 2.1 million and today to say it's 760 is shocking. And reviewing the original resolutions for the measure and then the duties and responsibilities document, I would agree that I don't think we're serving the voters by not addressing the bigger issue. I would also be interested in having a deeper discussion about the process. My thoughts would be along the lines of Glenn's idea of what is funded through Z that is continuing to increase at this rate. All we can do is make a recommendation, but I think, and again, it feels like it's rushed upon us because the 10-year projections that we asked for 2 years ago, to have seen them be realized and be, way under that in such a short time, even with everything else going on in the planet, is shocking, like I said. So I would support bringing an agendized discussion and looking for some more information from staff to support a real, valid, frank conversation about it.
Go ahead, Nicholas.
I'm wondering if this is something that is something that we should work through on a subcommittee level, so that we can sit down as committee members and be able to discuss options in a forum that is much more conducive towards communications and exchanging ideas. I feel like this venue right now, the time is very managed and very, we have an agenda that we need to power through. And this topic is so much more than, do we have a proposal ahead of us, in front of us? I mean, I had kind of brought up some of these concerns earlier this year, and Justin, your comment to me was, I need a proposal in writing that I can review. And that's absolutely fair. That's absolutely true. We need to be able to spend dedicated time to really discuss and think about how this works. And I don't think this is the setting to do that. And so I guess I'm wondering, is a subcommittee the right setting, or is there another setting that is appropriate to have those discussions?
In thinking about introducing this topic, obviously it's incumbent on somebody who basically stirs the pot to suggest how you could, calm it down a little bit. And in my mind, there can be an efficient utilization of our time and still an appropriate discussion about the appropriateness of our historic process via the following mechanism. Looking at this from my own personal view, the total amount of money available makes very, very little difference to me in how I would rank these applications, relative to each other. The problem that I'm facing is the relative volume of applications versus the paucity of funding available. So in my mind, it's possible for us to take our historic pattern and utilize it as far as the ranking of the proposals is concerned, but at the same time have a parallel discussion saying, okay, we do not, or let me speak for myself, I do not believe that any outcome of that discussion will materially affect how I'm going to rank the applications. So I think that ranking process could go forward as it has historically happened. I think it works well. I think it's effective. I think it's transparent to the community. So I think all of those are attributes. Having said that, then you get to the end of the discussion, you say, okay, here's our ranked list. But now, as a secondary recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, we as a committee feel that you should consider, maybe we have an alternate, maybe we don't when we're all done. But just assume for the sake of discussion, we come up with some sort of alternative proposal for them to consider. We can say, here's our ranked list done according to our historic process. But given the realities that we face with the actual funding amounts today, here is what we think you should consider as representatives of the community to try to best serve the community overall. And that way, I think we've done our due diligence on both sides of the equation. We followed a historic process, which I think is valid and has worked well, but we also are honest and transparent with the community, saying we don't think, you know, maybe we don't think, I don't know what the outcome will be, but there's a possibility at least that the community is not best served by what we've done, or what the Board of Supervisors more properly has done as far as the actual allocation is concerned. So to me, this is, you know, my suggestion is a pretty big upheaval of our process, and I understand that. So I would be in favor of having that discussion occur in a parallel format with the historic process of ranking the applications, because in my mind, and speaking only for myself, I don't think the one discussion necessarily influences or has to predispose the other one. I think the ranking process could go forward historically without having a material effect on the other discussion.
Glenn, are you suggesting that this would be somewhat of a clawback to what would be considered as the ongoing funding that the board approves each year for the positions where the Measure Z committee had recommended adding another position? And if so, then secondarily, are you then suggesting that there would be another ranking of that new open box of all those requests for funding, and perhaps intermingling the ranking with what's being proposed for today as well?
The short answer to your question is no. I do not anticipate a secondary ranking process and so on. My thought initially, and we haven't looked at this, and I haven't discussed this with staff, so it's not fair, you know, to drop it on them. But my initial thought on this, quite frankly, is the very minimum that I would like to do is, again, I'm only speaking for myself as an individual member, I would like to take a look at our historic pattern of funding the county positions. There has been a relatively consistent pattern of there being vacant positions across all of the county departments and so on. And then what ultimately happens is when the vacancy is known to be long-term enough in duration that it's unlikely that that entity will expend that money that year, the staff pulls the money back in, and then the Board of Supervisors is able to go further down the list and so on. My initial thought was I would like to consider a concept where we take a look at what exists on the ground in real time now with real personnel, and say Department A has 5 vacancies, okay? And we look at what their historic vacancy pattern has been, and if they carry, say, 4 of those vacancies through year after year after year, then the only clawback, so to speak, that I would like to see is I would like to see us recommend that the Board of Supervisors take the value of those 4 positions and add it to this quote-unquote discretionary portion, you know, of the recommendation. All that does essentially is allows the Board of Supervisors to move further down the recommendation list. And if in fact that historic pattern of vacancy is consistent, it doesn't hurt the, I'll call it donor agency and so on. But what it does do that's important though is it moves the timeline, because all of these agencies that are asking for money outside of the county, many of them have personnel costs and so on. And if they find out 6 months into the year that, oh, now this money is going to be available, their capability to fill that position and staff it is essentially non-existent. So what I would like to do is try to bring as much of the tertiary money that exists on the personnel side back into the original discussion, so that the outside agencies have some capability potentially to fund their projects and so on, and not wait till they get further into the second or third quarter of the year before that money is identified as being available. I think that's fair to the county departments, and I think it's fair to the community in the sense that we're trying to maximize the distribution of the money in an effective way that also takes into consideration their personnel processing times and costs.
Thank you, Glenn.
Excuse me, Chair Robbins.
Yes.
Sheriff Hansel has his hand up on Zoom to speak.
Sheriff Hansel, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. I appreciate the conversation, and these are important questions that Glenn and the rest of the body are asking. I think we should agendize this and we should discuss it this next meeting and talk about potential remedies to all this. But I just do want to remind everyone as well is that, this is a county tax and a county sales tax for essential county services. And right now, county services that are being funded are essential and are necessary. As the sheriff's office has historically taken the biggest bite out of this apple, we have essentially filled all of our positions within Measure Z. We do not have really salary savings in this area, and our costs have continued to gone up. And so with that comes increased hits to the Measure Z budget. And so I understand everyone's point of view, but in reality, again, every city has their own sales tax that they don't share with the county, and they are providing essential services to each one of those cities. And I would like to be able to put in a request for offering essential services that we already provide to those cities, but we don't get to do that. We are coming to the end of this funding, looks like. We did not, I think, as a county, at least they didn't predict that the amount of revenue that was declining over the last couple of years, and how it's tied to the marijuana industry and several others, and the economic downturn has really taken a toll on the county's economy. So the county has taken the biggest hit, but I think it's important to know, as far as this committee is concerned, is what are we going to do when we don't have any more money to allocate, and we have to then the county departments are taking up all this funding, and then who gets prioritized within the county. So those are important conversations to have, and I think we should agendize it for next week and discuss it then.
Thank you, Sheriff Hansel. Would anybody else, my fellow committee members, like to make any comments? Ginger, please.
I just wanted to know, Sean, can you, just for the sake of the public that may be watching, is there a way to put up all of the departments that are covered by that initial funding, not just the sheriff's department, that we're talking about? It's not just the sheriff's department, right? It's other county agencies.
Correct. Yeah, it's the Sheriff's Department, Probation, Public Defender, Health and Human Services, Human Resources, and Public Works.
Okay, so those.
In our office.
Okay, so those are ongoing.
County agencies, correct.
Those are the county that are ongoing, that they don't have to ask for money.
For salary costs.
For salary costs.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not just the sheriff's department.
Correct.
Just for the people listening, I don't want them to be confused about that.
That's
okay,
correct.
thanks.
Thanks, Ginger. So we've heard from committee members on this, and appreciate everyone's comments. I should call for public comment on this item as well. So if anybody here in the hall would like to make public comment, ma'am, come on forward and come up to the podium, please. We'd love to hear your name and where you're from.
Absolutely. This is the first time I've met with you. Thank you for having us come in. My name is Cindy Lyman. I live in Petrolia. I've been there 55 years. So I've seen the roads when they were mostly dirt. And I was driving a 65 Mustang at the time, and I was going probably a little faster than I should have back then. But I appreciate the roads and their condition now. And of course, after the storm, we've had some additional work that needs to be done. But what I wanted to bring up is kind of a memory lane, if you will, cannonball jumping into the Mattole River at AWA Park, 4th of July barbecue at our Grange, gathering seashells down at the mouth of the Mattole along with driftwood with your family and your little children. These are some of the best memories that the Mattole can offer people, and the way that we get there is either through Bull Creek or through the Wildcat. And there's also a 100-mile loop that can be done from one point to the other. And that is done every year by bicycle, amazingly enough. And a lot of people just gather their children up and put them in the car, the grandchildren, and do that 100-mile loop on a memorable time to do that. Our roads are very important to us. For the good times and for the bad times, we need those roads. We need them in good condition. Sunny brought up some really good points. One of them is the emergency vehicles that have to make their way for people. We live a far way out. When we call for an ambulance, it does take over an hour. If you can imagine being in your homes and having to wait an hour and a half to 2 hours for an emergency vehicle to come. I live 1 mile away from the Petrolia store. We have a volunteer fire department out there, and they use the road to come to us. About 8 years ago, we lost a barn. It took them a half an hour. And the reason is they had to respond, and I understand that. But if you have a family emergency and you want people to come immediately, it's important to have those roads in good condition. Earthquakes happen, fires happen. We are been blessed out there in the Mattole Valley to have not had any major fires in years out there. But it's not a matter of if it happens, it's when it happens, just like the earthquakes we've had recently. And we know that's a when, not an if. We appreciate the funding that we have been allocated, and we appreciate any additional funds that we could have to keep those roads open for us, for our family, and for people to come out and enjoy the Mattole Valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Hey, Tom, come on up.
Tom
Welcome.
Matson, Director of Public Works, and while the subject you're talking about really doesn't affect me very much, I do have a couple of positions. However, it vastly affects my fellow department heads and changes the whole game on what applications they put together for this year. And so I would just throw out for the concern of my department heads that are not here, that if you take money back this year, you give them an opportunity to do supplemental budget requests through Measure Z, because they may want to ask for those funds specifically and drop their current applications. This is kind of game-changing at a late date, unless it's something you put off till a decision off on next year. If you're going to take money out of my existing budget and I'm asking for something different, my existing budget is more important to me than asking for the new stuff. I need everything I'm asking for, but I'm assuming it's same for the other department. It's a much bigger hit on the other departments. So I just want to throw that out for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else here in the chambers that wants to come up and give public comment? Anybody online, Nikki? Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on to, well, the next item on the agenda is to distribute the applications, which basically has already been done. And so we're coming to item number 5, which is the review of the applications for fiscal year 23-24. And we're going to be holding a kind of yes/no vote here, whether each of these individual project applications meets the intent of Measure Z. But before we start with that, I want to open this up for public comment. So is there any member of the public here in the chambers or online that wants to give public comment as we review the application for its eligibility of a yes or no to meet the intent of Measure Z? All right, not seeing anybody in the chamber. Anybody online?
Nobody online.
All right, excellent. So, Sean?
Wait, I do see, it looks like a couple hands went up.
All right, very good. Pick a hand there, Nikki.
Sorry about that. So I have the Public Health Branch, Division of Environmental, whatever. I can't read the whole thing. I'm sorry. So.
Hello.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I need to change my name there. I am a county employee. I am on my break at the moment, but I did want to weigh in on one of the proposals. My name is Mario Kelson. I own a home in Manila and I'm raising 3 young kids close to Redwood Coast Montessori and adjacent to a site that would benefit from a speed table as proposed by Manila Community Service District. Folks of all ages walk along Peninsula Drive where we live. Retired folks exercising, teenagers walking their dogs, elementary school kids, some with their parents, some on their own. I hope to have taught my kids about the dangers of distracted drivers, but kids, after all, are distracted themselves. As such, my wife and I try to help our kids cross the street because folks really drive too fast along Peninsula where we live. There's folks that need reminders of the dangers of driving on that narrow street. Speed limit signs are posted to control traffic below 25 miles per hour and 15 miles per hour when kids are present. I can tell you that there are always kids present. Unfortunately, drivers dismiss the signage and frequently exceed 25 and even 30 miles an hour. This includes the county bus. A speed table was successful in calming drivers entering the school zone from the north. An additional speed table is needed for the southern approach. Other roads in Manila would also benefit in traffic calming strategies. I participate in the Peninsula Community Collaborative meetings and recognize a need to slow traffic along Peninsula Drive and in the Manila community in general. We are divided by Highway 255 and need help to increase safety by slowing traffic, encourage walking and biking as alternative modes of transportation, and reunite our small town. Thanks for your time and consideration of the MCSD application for speed tables. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Who else do we have online, Nikki?
Thank you. I have Colleen Clifford.
Hey, Colleen, go ahead, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi, I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this. I'm also speaking as a Manila homeowner and resident about item 14, the traffic calming in Manila. And I live one road south of the school. We have lived in our house for 20 years. I live with my husband and 2 kids, ages 8 and 13. And we love living in Manila. It is beautiful. It is a rural community within the coastal zone that has unique environmental and ecological features, as well as a quiet, slow-paced character. So we're very happy to be here, and we're very happy that the school moved in and offered this opportunity for our family and others as well. So as I said, my kids are aged 8 and 13, and we walk daily to and from school. And it's just a short walk for us, but that stretch along Peninsula Drive has no sidewalk, and there's barely any shoulder. In fact, there's no shoulder at many parts. And as much as drivers usually behave themselves, it is terrifying for me to think about my youngest walking even the shortest stretches alone without me nagging him to get to the side, get to the side. When cars come from both directions, they have to either slow down until one passes, or we have to walk off the road on neighboring property. So that's just to give you an idea of the kind of walk we have. And like I said, most people are respectful, but when a car zooms by, it's really nerve-wracking. So we really support this idea for a speed hump on the southern part of Peninsula Drive, the southern portion by the school. Not only would our family benefit, but all the other families and people walking along the road on Peninsula. There's also a lot of pets and wildlife that use this area, so we would really appreciate them having a chance to have that beautiful rural coastal zone life that we love out there as well. So yeah, we'd appreciate your moving that project ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I have no more callers.
Well, go ahead, please.
So this is just a technical problem. A few years ago, the Garberville Community Services District asked us to fund fire hydrants, right? Do you remember that? And we decided as a committee, and Ernie Branscombe, who was a member at the time, was the one that really brought it up and said, we should not be paying for that because a community services district charges people. There's a fee in order to be part of a community services district. And so that would be, if they need something, they should raise the price of whatever it is. I'm all for safe walking. I mean, especially in places like Manila. But I was wondering if, since we kind of agreed on, I don't know if we voted on it, but if we're opening up the door, if we ever have money again, to fund community services districts. And I think in the past, since the fire hydrant thing, that people did apply, and I think we did say, no, we're not going to fund community services districts.
Thank you, Ginger. All right, Nicholas, please.
Sean, I just wanted to ask if you could post the ballot language for the measure while we're going through the next process.
I have it ready.
Yay.
Bob, please.
Before we get into the initial ranking to determine if a project is eligible or not for Measure Z funding, I do want to state that after going through and reading all the applications, all these projects are very well deserving of funding. They do serve an important public purpose, and whether or not the committee votes to include that in for Measure Z funding doesn't take away the importance of that particular project and its need for funding. With this process, and I think each year it gets harder and harder to look at these projects when we know that there's more projects than there's funding available. And when we start to closely look at the application and how it relates to the ballot language, you really have to have a tight application that narrowly conforms within what the ballot language is to get a yes vote. I do want to thank all the applicants for their hard work. These are all very, very good projects.
Thank you, Bob, for saying that. All right, well, Sean, I think we're ready to start to go through each of these one at a time, and I take it what you're going to do, sir, is just announce the number and the agency/project, and then we'll just go right down the row here, and everybody will indicate with either a yes or no whether they believe it meets the ballot language and therefore is eligible for funding. For recommendation of funding, thank you.
Yes, that sounds good.
I'm going to get the ballot language up. I think most of us here have a copy of the list in front of us, and we can be tallying up as we're going. But if it is possible to get the list of applications up as well on a side screen, that would be nice. But we'll settle for the ballot language.
All right, there's the ballot language that is from the renewal measure. So this is Measure O, but again, we call it Measure Z because that is the creation of the ordinance. Measure O just simply had to deal with the sunset date. All right, so we'll go ahead and begin with application number 1, Adult Protective Services and the District Attorney. And we'll go ahead and just do a roll call, if that's all right, Chair. Mr. Cole? Yes. Mr. Bronco?
No.
Sheriff Hansel?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell? Yes. Chair
Yes.
Robbins? Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
And Ms. Trent?
This one just asks for continued training and travel to out-area conferences, and that's why I don't believe it fits into the, so I'm going to go no.
Okay, I have that at 7-2. I'm sorry, 6-2 with 1 absent.
Yes, sir.
All right, application number 2, City of Arcata Police Department for $248,000. Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Bronco?
Yes.
Sheriff Hansel?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Chair Robbins?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
Ms. Trent?
Yes.
Okay, 8-0. Application number 3, City of Eureka for $499,000. Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Bronco?
No.
Sheriff Hansel?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
And Ms. Trent?
Yes.
7-1. Application number 4, City of Fortuna Police Department for $207,000. I'm going to go in reverse order this time. Ms. Trent?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
Yes.
Chair? Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
and Mr. Cole.
Yes.
8-0. Application number 5, City of Fortuna Police Department for $300,000. Ms. Trent,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Sheriff,
No.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
and Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Application number 6, City of Fortuna Police Department for $207,000. This is for the school resource officer. Ms. Trent,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
8-0. Application number 7, City of Rio Dale Police Department for $34,000. Ms. Trent,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
No.
and Mr. Cole.
Yes.
All right, application number 8, City of Rio Dale Police Department. I'll switch it around again. Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
Sheriff Hansel,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
and Ms. Trent.
Yes.
8-0. Application number 9, City of Trinidad, $85,000 for private security officers. Mr. Cole,
No.
Mr. Bronco,
No.
Sheriff,
No.
Mr. Robertson,
No.
Ms. Campbell,
No.
Chair,
No.
Mr. Zemer,
No.
Ms. Trent,
No.
0-8. Application number 10, Eureka City Schools for $142,000 for a school resource officer. Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
and Ms. Trent.
Yes.
8-0. Application number 11, Fire Chiefs Association for $3 million. Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
and Ms. Trent.
Yes.
8-0. Application number 12, Humboldt Senior Resource Center for $56,000 for a full-time community resource and housing specialist. Mr. Cole,
No.
Mr. Bronco,
No.
Sheriff,
No.
Mr. Robertson,
No.
Ms. Campbell,
No.
Chair,
No.
Mr. Zemer,
No.
Ms. Trent.
No.
0-8. Application number 13, Kamal Medical Center, $468,000. Ms. Trent,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Robbins,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
and Mr. Cole.
Yes.
8-0. Application number 14, Manola Community Center. Ms. Trent,
No.
Mr. Zemer,
No.
Mr. Robbins,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
No.
Mr. Robertson,
No.
Sheriff,
No.
Mr. Bronco,
No.
and Mr. Cole.
Yes.
2-6. Number 15, Public Defender for $356,000. Ms. Trent.
What number is that?
Number 15.
Number 15.
Yes.
Mr. Zemer.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Robertson.
Yes.
Sheriff.
Yes.
Mr. Bronco.
No.
Mr. Cole. No. 6-2. Number 16, Public Works for $465,000.
I want to interrupt for a second.
Yes.
On mine, on the public offenders, is that for 2 social workers and 1 investigator?
That's right.
That is correct.
Okay, on my paper, it said it's number 24, or the last one. My vote's still the same, it's just not on the right. That's why I was confused.
It's handwritten down at the bottom.
Oh. Okay.
Handwritten on the bottom of the sheet.
Really?
Oh, on the trackers that was handed out to you?
Yeah.
What do you have as number 14 then?
Number 14 I have is the school. And then number 15 was Public Works Department.
Okay. Okay, I'll go by the description and the amount and make sure that, and make sure that we're talking about the same applications. So the application I have is number 16. Nikki, can you scroll up a little bit on that screen? Because I believe they are numbered on the agenda online there. So they have 15, so, right. So number 16 is the Public Works, the chip seal, slurry seal for $465,000. Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Mr. Bronco.
Yes.
Sheriff.
Yes.
Mr. Robertson.
Yes.
Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
Chair. Mr. Zemer.
Yes.
Ms. Trent.
Yes.
8-0. Number 17 is Public Works Department, illegal dumping for $250,000. Mr. Cole?
No.
Mr. Bronco?
No.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
Ms. Trent?
No.
5 ayes and 3 noes. Number 18 is Public Works. That is the Matol, yes, the Matol Road for $500,000. And Ms. Trent?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Bronco?
Yes.
And Mr. Cole?
Yes.
And number 19, Public Works, West End Road. Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Bronco?
Yes.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
And Ms. Trent?
Yes.
8-0. Number 20 is Redwood Parks Conservancy. Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer? I'm sorry, Mr. Bronco?
Yes.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
And Ms. Trent?
Yes.
Application 21, Sheriff's Office. Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Bronco?
Yes.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Yes.
Chair? Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
And Ms. Trent?
Yes.
8-0. Application 22, Southern Trinity Area Rescue. Ms. Trent?
Yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
Chair?
No.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Bronco?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
7-1. Application 23 is People of New Directions. Ms. Trent?
No.
Mr. Zemer?
No.
Mr. Chair?
No.
Ms. Campbell?
No.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Sheriff?
No.
Mr. Bronco?
No.
Mr. Cole?
No.
1-7. And final application, number 24, the Yurok tribe. Ms. Trent?
What if part of it doesn't, I don't think qualify and part of it does?
This is a question for your committee to decide.
You have to kind of make that decision for yourself, Tammy, is what I would say about that. So, in essence, if you think a part of it is, then you may want to say yes, because in essence, whatever the final motion is on a recommendation, it's not necessarily in the practice of the last few years, but technically speaking, a motion can be made that takes out those elements of an application that you find not to meet the,
Okay.
meet the language.
Then I'll go with a yes.
Mr. Zemer?
Yes.
Chair?
No.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Robertson?
Yes.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Bronco?
No.
And Mr. Cole?
Yes.
6-2.
All right. Thank you, Sean, and thanks for everyone to get through that process there. So that comes to item number 6, the review of the remaining process required prior to April 19th recommendations. And we've really had a lot of discussion about this already under item number 3. And so I have a thought I want to share, and that is that 10-year predictions are really tough to actually come true. So I'll say this for myself, I don't rely on 10-year projections for much in life. And I don't think this committee, or for that matter, most other departments in the county should either. That's just way too far out to know what's going on. 5 years is really tough. And if we look back how much things have changed in the last 5 years, well, they've changed tremendously. So 10 years out is a really hard distance of time to project out. And I think what we're going to hear here in a little bit is maybe we'll have a motion in terms of that staff direction, if there is any, to come back to. Is there any information that fellow committee members want to have in advance of our next meeting so we can further this discussion about our recommendations to the Board of Supervisors after we go through the ranking process? Please, Sean.
Chair, there was also a mention from Mr. Cole about potentially forming some kind of an ad hoc. Let's not call it a subcommittee because there's Brown Act implications, but an ad hoc is a time-limited subcommittee, so that idea could be discussed as well.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else? Nicholas, anything else you want to say about an ad hoc committee?
I think it would be a forum for us to be able to delve into that conversation. I don't really know what our expectations are as far as this calendar or this process for this year. I had been holding off on any of my proposals because I felt implementing them during this process would be prohibitive. But if we can kind of start to build the venue that we can get together and discuss, rather than having to wait for these meetings where we're not, we're in accord with the Brown Act, I would love to participate in that.
Thank you. Well, let me ask this. Is there another committee member in addition to Nicholas that would, or more than one, that would like to participate in such an effort? Because in essence, if there's just one, then the two of you can work together on a proposal outside of an ad hoc committee, because that's still, meeting the standard of the Brown Act. So I would just start there. Is there at least one other individual here in the committee that would like to work with Nicholas on a draft proposal? And to me, it doesn't really matter if it's for this cycle or next cycle, but just that doesn't matter. But I regret using that word, but that doesn't matter. But it's okay if it's not implemented until next cycle. Just moving forward with a recommendation in writing would be just personally helpful for myself. Any?
What exactly are you talking about?
Clarify a little more.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Sean.
I'll use my understanding to maybe help clarify. What I'm understanding is we're looking to create a subcommittee to draft proposals to amend the process, and that would be in parallel, or it would be outside this forum and the schedule, without the intent of having a deadline within this year to come up with some solutions to present. And so it would be an ad hoc committee to discuss alternative processes, or I would assume recommendations to the board within the process. That's my understanding. So if that helps clarify, that's why I'm speaking.
Thank you for that. That's my understanding as well. Is basically it's a process to identify some type of alternative. And Glenn, I mean, you suggested an alternative. You know what I mean? And I'll say this: the alternative that Glenn suggested to me was fine. And I mean, how I kind of thought about doing it on my long drive up here today was that we would go through the traditional process. And what I would want to say as chair is that as chair, I would be interested in hearing any creative motions that would basically make a recommendation based off the money that we believe we have available to provide the best possible recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. And most likely that would be outside of just making one applicant being recommended for funding, because the level that we're talking about, I mean, the amount of money that we're talking about is available for funding. One applicant will take it most up. I mean, traditionally the applicants that have been funded will take it all up. So, but really the alternative that you were talking about, Glenn, is certainly, from my opinion, is sufficient. Appropriate, excuse me.
Just a couple of questions so I'd understand the process. So Nicholas's suggestion is that there be an ad hoc committee that works essentially outside of this domain, and there presumably would come back to this committee with some potential, action item of some sort that then would be potentially supported for the next process, but not this process. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's my understanding.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah. My concern, quite frankly, is the timing of it. I don't feel like I said, I come at this with, how can I represent this community in the best possible way? And as much as I understand the limitations we would face in the short time frame we have this year, some of these programs and the capability of some of these to reestablish themselves will probably go away, quite frankly. So I'm more than happy to work with you on it. I'm concerned about the pre-existing designation that we would do nothing this year and apply it the following year. That causes me some heartburn.
I have a potential compromise. What Glenn said, and with a comment from Director Manson, made me think that we discussed in our 2 meetings ago that at mid-year, we would have a better idea of what potential salary savings would be. And essentially, that's what I heard you mention, Glenn, is that we aren't going to require a clawback, and we certainly have no authority to affect any existing programs. So we're not going to affect that. So that's not a threat, but changing the process within this cycle does have significant consequences that I think we're unaware of. So if my thought would be that to request staff to present a report on potential salary savings, that at least through our committee, we could say we're aware of these potential additional salary savings or budgetary savings that could be allocated to other projects in Measure Z, so that if we're making our ranking, we at least have some capacity to fund the projects without, like you just said, right now we're going to barely be able to fund the most important ones that we funded for years. So that would be my solution to both of these issues. I think we keep talking about coming up with a different process, and I think we're just kicking the can down the road. So I think if we do establish an ad hoc committee, we'll at least have somebody identified who can come up with something concrete. I would hope that Glenn would participate in that because he has some interesting ideas that I would like to talk more about.
I'm happy to participate. My question is this. I doubt that any committee, not just myself or any other 2 members, can do this in isolation. So my question is, what is the staff's availability in the next 2 to 3 weeks to support the process we're discussing? Is it even reasonable, or is that out of the question? Or
I will make myself available to this committee.
okay.
I wanted to bring up maybe one thing we could add. I absolutely respect the immediacy of the challenge we're facing as far as what we're able to allocate or not. One thing I'd like to put forward maybe is, rather than us looking at the money that we have to allocate, we look at our priorities and we identify the top amount, our top priorities of applications, and we make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that says these applications are the most important to this committee. We don't care if they're funded by Measure Z or if they're not funded by Measure Z, but we want you, as the Board of Supervisors, to find a way to support these to the best of your ability. And in this short time frame that we have to make the recommendations, I think that's the way that we can convey our intention and what's important to us in a way that is at least more meaningful.
Nicholas, I find that comment personally very interesting. And in a way, I would be supportive of going through that. I'm just personally curious what that exercise would produce. And I'll say this, it's very difficult for myself to, cause that sounds like an academic exercise, which I say has value to it, right? But I'm just kind of thinking about how, and so then what's the next exercise to bring that back into the real world, where we have to, make how does one signify that something's a priority if there's not money to make it a priority? One comment I shared, maybe not last year, but the year prior, was when we're doing these rankings, and right, traditionally we ranked 1, 2, and 3. 1 is a top priority. To me, we should only, as individuals, be only ranking items as top priority number 1 as the funding allows. So in essence, if you've done your own rankings and once your total has exceeded the amount available, then you should be no longer making number 1 priority rankings, because there is no more money to fund that. And in essence, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? That's how a true priority is, because you're prioritizing something over something else because, well, there's only so much funding available. Now, we're not held to that at this committee. We choose to do that ourselves in terms of whether we rank only to what available funding there is. But I'll just say this, that's what I intend to do. So if I have just one application that exceeds $700,000, then I'm only going to be announcing one priority. Go ahead, Sean.
I found that super interesting because what I heard Nicholas say was exactly what we do. I mean, that's what we do. We prioritize the projects and we say we think the board should fund these. And what we've struggled with in the past is feeling limited by the funds available. And I feel like in this case, it's obviously beyond what we've dealt with before, but I don't agree with having a priority based on the available funding because like you said, a 10-year projection is a projection. The sales tax revenue projections are projections. And the board has the ability to fund them in whatever way they see fit. And many of the programs that they fund, they're already struggling with the budget, et cetera. So, yeah, I completely agree with Nicholas, and that's what we do, and I think that's what we should do again. So I think, going back full circle to what Glenn said earlier, we should continue on our regular process, assuming that these are all going to be funded, and prioritize them as we've done in the past, but look to how we can affect the process differently.
Nicholas,
because
first.
I think the difficulty is, and why I said we kick the can down the road is, I've yet to hear a really creative idea that's actually going to solve a big problem here.
Thank you, Sean. Nicholas first, and then we'll go to Glenn.
I think that our prioritization process is the tool that we have in existence, that our ranking process is the tool we have to help move us forward, especially on something that's this immediate. The one difference that I'm thinking that we should include, rather in the past it's been an open-ended ranking, I think we need to be very clear about what we're asking the Board of Supervisors to incorporate in their budget process. What I'm saying, like we need to identify 5, 6, 4. I don't know how many applications we're going to do as a committee because I'm just speaking for myself, but we need to limit it to an amount that says identify applications that we feel are the biggest priorities for the good for the community that we need. And I feel the ranking process is part of that, but I think we need to go through at some point at the end of the process and say, where in the ranking process is that line of need? And that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Go ahead, sir.
To try to move this along, am I correct in my sense that there's kind of the general direction this seems to be going is that Nicholas and I and staff would meet, and my thought is that in our initial meeting, we would try to define the parameters of the discussion. And the reason I say that, I want to be completely candid. I think I'm probably open to much more radical changes than the majority of the committee. And if I'm the only one that's open to those, let's identify that and say to ourselves, that's a great idea, but it's not going anywhere, so let's not waste our time with it. So my concept of the initial meeting would be, it would try to define the parameters that are even able to be discussed and maybe considered by the committee. That seems like a productive way to initially approach the problem. And that way we can bring back 3 or 4 or 5 ideas to the committee and say, here are options that we feel are available to us. Does the committee have the stomach for any of them or not? Or do these have support to go anywhere? That strikes me as a productive way to do business, and it isn't also wasting the staff's time running down a bunch of financial rabbit holes. So in the context of that kind of discussion, I'm happy to work with Nicholas and staff and try to come back next week or maybe the week after at the latest with kind of I'll call it a loose framework of discussion that would allow us to identify those things that are potentially viable, number 1, number 2, productive, number 3, that the committee can stomach.
Just a process question here. Are we able to take action on this today to establish an ad hoc committee, or does that have to be agendized as an action item?
No, you can, the discussion item is reviewing the process going forward. So you can absolutely take action to form a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee if you'd like.
Thank you, Sean. Ginger? Bob, go ahead, sir.
I'd like to support the idea of forming the ad hoc committee to come up with a slate of alternatives for the committee to further discuss. However, I don't think they should be applied to this year's processing, as applicants have already submitted materials based upon the way the committee has operated in the past. I would suggest if the ad hoc committee is formed, that perhaps that motion would suggest that the committee would start reporting back once the Measure Z committee concludes its processing of the applications for this year, so that we're not spending a lot of time when we have applicants waiting in the audience to go ahead and speak on their project and hearing us discuss matters that aren't going to be applicable to this batch of applications. And that way it best serve the committee and best serve the applicants that are wanting to find out if their project's going to receive funding or not.
Do you want to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is that sufficient, Sean?
Can you summarize?
I'll re-summarize.
Yeah, summarize for that for the staff, please.
My motion is to form an ad hoc committee where the ad hoc committee may begin meeting immediately, but will not report back to the committee until such time as the final rankings of the Measure Z committee have been made. And the committee's goal, or the ad hoc committee's goal, is to go ahead and provide a slate of alternatives of how projects could be ranked.
Just a quick clarifying question. Does this motion include the members of the committee that will be part of that ad hoc committee?
It can. I'm not sure if the,
It's your choice whether you want to include them or not, but a motion will have to be made at some point to appoint the members who will be part of that.
I thought the first step would be just to establish the ad hoc committee, and then if created, then there could be discussion about who would sit on that committee.
Very good. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second for purposes.
It's so seconded.
I have a
Go ahead, sir.
question for the maker. Just so I'm clear on your timeline and so on, you said that the committee would not report back to the Z committee until after the prioritization process was complete. Is it your anticipation that or is it your intent that there be no communication to the board with this year's process, and that any recommendations that were ultimately adopted would only go forward next year?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions or comments? Sean?
Yeah, I don't want to wait because we're trying to deal with the issue now. I understand the efficacy of not wasting time, but a simple report, we may not necessarily need a discussion, but we could allocate time for it. I think if we wait till the end, yeah, that's just too long.
Thank you, Sean. Any other committee members want to make a comment? Sheriff Hansel, anything you want to add to the discussion?
Just want to say that the process is already in motion right now, and so to change it in the middle of it would be very detrimental to county budgets and the county system in place. So I would be supporting Bob Bronco's motion.
Thank you, Sheriff. Fellow committee members, any other comments? Let's open this to public comment. Any public comment, either here in the Board of Supervisors chambers or online, regarding the motion on the table? All right, not seeing any. Sean, can we do a roll call vote?
All right, Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
No.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
No.
Ms. Trent.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-2.
All right. That begs the question of who would get appointed to the committee. Is there anybody here on the committee that would like to make a motion that would appoint members of this committee to serve in the ad hoc committee that's just been formed?
Should you maybe see who wants to do it?
Go ahead and speak. Yeah, it's all right.
I would.
All right, so Tammy is volunteering. Anyone else?
I'll volunteer.
And Glenn? All right. Any, Tammy, would you want to make that into a form of a motion?
Okay, I nominate the three of us for the ad hoc committee.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Bob. Any members in the committee want to make a comment on the motion on the table? Members of the public here in the chamber or online, any public comment on the motion on the table?
No online, Chair.
Not seen any. I think we're ready for a vote.
So to be clear, Chair, the motion is to appoint Tammy Trent, Glenn Zemer, and Nicholas Cole to the subcommittee for the purposes that were acted on just prior.
Affirmative.
Ad hoc committee.
Gosh, I'm breaking my own rules, am I? Thank you.
Thank
a lot
you.
on my brain today. Ms. Trent,
Yes.
Mr. Zemer,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell, Mr. Robertson,
Yes.
Sheriff,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
and Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, I have one more question about this year's.
Please.
So in the past, the committee has only wanted to fully fund a project. Can that be changed? Because obviously, there's a lot of projects that are above the full amount. So can it be changed to where we might be able to take portions, like there's some in here, like I said, that I don't think fully qualify? Can we make that to where we fund part of it and not all of it, or recommend funding part of it or not all of it?
Tammy, I would answer that question by saying yes. In essence, it kind of is similar to what we were just talking about a little bit ago, right? If we're going to go through this process of ranking, and then when that process is over, there'll be a motion and a second and a vote on that. And in essence, if the motion's made that include and is seconded and voted on that includes these potential reductions or modifications that we're hypothesizing right now, then in essence, that's what would take the form of the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. So as long as that is included in the motion and what is seconded and approved by the committee for recommendation on the Board of Supervisors, then I believe the answer is yes.
Okay. What?
Chair, so in prior years, your committee has traditionally put out an ask to applicants to reduce their applications, to submit reduced budgets for their proposals. And I would expect that would be part of the process again this year. It would be difficult to make that request, get information back from applications, and get that information posted for the upcoming agenda, because we hope to get an agenda posted by tomorrow afternoon, but potentially in the following meeting. If your committee were to make such an ask, we could gather such information.
Sean?
Yeah, we've discussed this before. We've asked the applicants. What I recall is they overwhelmingly said that they submit the applications based on the expectation of it being fully funded. That's what they need. For us to then go in and fund what we think is appropriate, that to me changes the whole process. I would think, though, that we could accommodate that, and when we have discussions on the reductions, voluntary reductions, we could all make our comments on what we think is what we don't like, or what we think is a better application as part of that. But yeah, I have concerns with saying we would only fund part of it based on our decision there.
Yeah, and I share those concerns, and I just wanted to speak from the technical process standpoint. What the motion is made and what we vote on, that's what will be the recommendation. And so, right, just to speak about what's possible, for Tammy, just for clarification there. But I agree, Sean, with what you're saying. Did I see a hand down there? I'm sorry. You're fine, Nicholas? Okay. Yeah, I mean, the last note I had for me today is to talk about that voluntary reduction. And the comment I would want to give now is that all entities should greatly consider voluntarily reducing their asks, and to understand the political environment that we find ourselves in, and that we only have $750,000 available to allocate. So please see that reality, and please respond to that reality by greatly considering a reduction in one's application, so that, from my perspective, there's a greater chance of an application being approved. So just one person's opinion there. Sean, please.
So while we, I would take that to mean that staff would reach out to the applicants with that message to consider voluntarily reducing their applications. And while we wouldn't be able to gather that information to post into the agenda for next week, applicants could potentially come to the board or to the committee meeting next week while you discuss each application and discuss with your committee whether or not they'd be willing to reduce their application.
That's right. Thank you, Sean.
Can I make one more suggestion?
Tammy, please.
I would suggest that we do not fund any more positions, because that's over the years, that is what's taken this down, is because they're refunded. You know, once they're funded, generally we fund them again. And if we keep doing positions, pretty soon there's not going to be any one-time monies left. So I would make a suggestion of no new positions.
Thank you, Tammy. Is there any other, before we adjourn, is there any other comments or questions to staff from fellow committee members?
I'm not sure. Is it open to public comment on any of the comments that were just made?
Come on up, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Committee, Assistant Chief Stevens, Eureka Police Department. I've been doing this many years, staying in front of this committee, and I understand the reduction portion of the request when it comes to, we have $3.5 million, and we're trying to get down that list of prioritization that you guys make as part of your recommendation. And as an agency, there are times where we can assist with that to get other projects in. I find it hard this year with only $760,000 and with the potential of that number even going down by the time April 25th rolls around to request a reduction, because whatever reduction I make is not going to affect the next committee or next person after us, because like you said, your top priority, the top priority of this committee, is going to suck out every $760,000, whatever is left by the time we get there. So I find that hard. I would rather see the committee do the ranking as you have in the past as far as prioritizing the applications as they are, and then as money comes available, so be it. And if there are grants that are granted, if there's funding that comes available for different applications during this process, by all means, we'll pull whatever we have that we can assist the other applicants with that process. I also just want to make a point of conversation, maybe, or a note, that if I decide as an agency not to make a deduction in my application, and by your own words, Mr. Chair, that you said you would look at that differently potentially than an applicant that does make a reduction. I find that as potentially an unfair process in this, because if I think I need that much money and I've cut everything I need out of that, but somebody else makes a cut to their application, to be looked at differently just because I didn't make a reduction because I applied for what I needed, it doesn't seem like a fair process by the committee. And I just wanted to make that point from my personal standpoint, from somebody that's been here a long time, standing in front of you and making these recommendations. I appreciate and understand the difficulty that you all have in this process, but I did just want to thank you for the opportunity to make that point too, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, let me respond. I understand that comment, and this is most certainly a political process. This is a political process, and these are the kind of hard choices that one makes when leading a political process. We've opened up for public comment. Come on up, Tom.
Thank you, Tom Matson, Director of Public Works. I just want, it really helps when you ask for voluntary cutbacks when we see what the rankings are. Going through each and every one of my applications, if there's only one that's going to come near the top, I'm very community oriented, and I always look to what I can share with others. And there's one project I can't cut; it's all or none. The others are are flexible, but, you know, the need is there. But it really helps me when you've made that initial ranking, so I can see, well, if I cut 50,000, this one's going to get in. If I cut 100,000, this one's going to get in. But if I just cut out of the blue, then you're not giving me any educated point of what, if I can cut something to get somebody else in, that's very important, because they're all very important. I'd like to know what that number is. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mattson. Nicholas?
Just out of curiosity, is a modification to their application something that we can ask for after we make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors? So that when the Board of Supervisors gets the list, that's the opportunity for agencies to make cuts.
I'm understanding your question, right? I mean, it's entirely possible. Yeah.
I'm just going back to it comes back to the Board of Supervisors as the spot where these budget decisions are going to finally be made. And if the agencies are wanting clarity on what things look like, that's the space for it to happen.
Right. Thank you, Nicholas. Bob?
One thing that I think would be really helpful, and this is something that Glenn touched on earlier in the meeting, and that is in regards to, we'll call it the salary savings for unfilled positions. So if Agency A has Measure Z funding for a certain number of positions, but they're constantly running a vacancy of 15%, then that perhaps is an indicator that there is Measure Z funding that would not be utilized during the upcoming year, and that's potential money that then could be spread to other projects. So what I'm thinking that could be helpful for us is that we have the realistic hardline number that Sean prepared for us. There may be a second number that he has, call it a range number, that if vacancies continue at the rate that they had been, the funding may inch a little farther. Maybe we squeak a little more out of it. And I think having that potential range of where the funding might be could be helpful as we present this list forward to the board for final recommendation.
Thank you, Bob. And that's, just thinking back to our years past, that's pretty much what we've done. We've continued the ranking past the amount of money the staff has, staff has communicated to us, and we've gone another, I think, 500,000, maybe even $1 million over that in past years. So, Bob, I would agree with what you said. Is let's not cut our communication short to the Board of Supervisors and make sure that we're going beyond that number, anticipating, some sunny news. Thank you, Bob. Is there any other questions or comments from fellow committee members? Well, then I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you so much, everyone.